The shuttle landed with a soft thud on the metal platform. Sarah Chun felt the vibration through her boots as the engines powered down. She checked her uniform one last time and picked up her briefcase. The doors opened with a hiss and hot air. Rushed inside. Sarah stepped out onto the planet Korthek Prime. The gravity felt heavier here, pulling at her small frame. The air smelled like metal and something she could not name. Red dust swirled around her feet in the alien wind. A crowd of Korthek warriors waited for her. They stood like mountains made of muscle and bone. The smallest one was still twice her size. Their skin was gray like stone, marked with battle scars that told stories of countless fights. They wore armor that looked like it could stop bullets. But Sarah knew they preferred to fight with their bare hands. The Korthek stared down at her. Some pointed. Others made sounds that might have been laughter. Sarah was used to this. At 5 feet and 4 inches tall, with thin arms and a quiet voice, she did not look like much. Especially not here, surrounded by alien giants who could crush cars with their fists. War Chief Thalgrim stepped forward. His massive frame blocked out the red sun above them. Scars covered his face like a roadmap of violence. His eyes were the color of old blood, and they looked at Sarah like she was a bug that had wandered into the wrong place. This is the human diplomat. Thalgrim's voice was deep enough to shake the ground. This small thing? Sarah bowed her head slightly, the way her training had taught her. I am Commander Sarah Chun, representing the United Earth Government. Thank you for allowing me to visit your world. The Korthak warriors behind Thalgrim made more of those laughing sounds. One of them, a female with arms like tree trunks, spoke up. The humans sent us a child. Where are their real warriors? Perhaps. Their ships are broken, said another. Maybe this is all they could find. Sarah kept her face calm. She had heard worse things said about her. Much worse. In the military academies, the other cadets had called her Tiny Chun and the Mouse. Her instructors had wondered if she was strong enough to serve. But she had learned long ago that what people saw on the outside was not always the truth. Thalgrim walked around her in a slow circle, like a predator studying its prey. We heard stories about humans. They said you were Deathworlders. Dangerous. Fighters from a planet that tried to kill you every day. But you ... He stopped in front of her and leaned down. His breath smelled like raw meat. You look like you would break if I breathed too hard. Sometimes things are not what they appear to be, Sarah said quietly. This made some of the Korthek laugh even harder. One warrior who was so big he had to duck under the shuttle's wing slapped his knee. Listen to the tiny human talk. She thinks she is tough. Sarah's diplomatic team had stayed inside the shuttle. She could see their worried faces through the windows. They had not wanted her to come alone, but she had insisted. The Korthek respected strength above all else. Showing fear would end the negotiations before they began. Come, Thalgrim said, turning away. We will take you to the Great Hall. Try not to get lost, little human. The corridors here are built for real warriors, not ... whatever you are. The group began walking toward a massive building that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of black stone. Sarah followed, her small steps quick to keep up with their long strides. More Korthek lined the path, all staring at her with curious eyes. Some made jokes in their own language. Others just shook their heads, as if they could not believe what they were seeing. A young Korthak warrior ran up beside Thalgrim. War Chief, surely this is a mistake. The humans must have sent the wrong person. This cannot be their real diplomat. No. Mistake, Sarah said before Thalgrim could answer. I am exactly who they meant to send. The young warrior looked down at her with something that might have been pity. But you are so ... soft, so weak. How do you survive on your death world? Sarah smiled. It was not a warm smile. We manage. As they walked, Sarah's trained eyes took in everything. She noted how the Korthek moved, where they kept their weight, how they shifted when they prepared to strike. She saw the weak points in their armor, the spots where their thick muscles might work against them. Old habits from her military training kicked in automatically. The Great Hall's doors were 30 feet tall and covered in carvings of Korthek victories. Warriors defeating strange alien creatures. Ships burning in space. Worlds conquered and enemies crushed. The message was clear. The Korthek were conquerors, and they wanted everyone to know it. Inside, hundreds more Korthek filled the massive space. They sat on stone benches arranged in circles, all facing a central platform where Thalgrim took his place on a throne made from the bones of some huge creature. Sarah was given a small chair that looked like it had been made for a child. Contrast was not lost on anyone in the room. Whispers echoed off the stone walls as more Korthek filed in to see the tiny human diplomat who had dared to come to their world. Sarah sat straight in her chair, hands folded in her lap, and waited. She had learned patience in harder places then. The Korthek could stare and whisper all they wanted. Soon enough, they would learn that size was not everything. Soon enough, they would understand what humans were really capable of. The negotiations had been going badly for 3 hours. Sarah sat at the stone table, her papers spread out in front of her. The mining rights treaty was important to both their worlds, but the Korthek seemed more interested in showing off their strength than making a deal. War Chief Thalgrim leaned back in his massive chair. "Humans want to mine our moon," he said, his voice echoing in the hall. "But what do you offer us? Money? Technology? These things mean nothing to the Korthek." Sarah kept her voice steady. "The trade agreement would benefit both our peoples. Human technology could help your world grow stronger." "Stronger?" Thalgrim laughed, and the sound was like rocks falling down a mountain. "We are already strong. We do not need human toys." Other Korthek leaders around the table nodded their agreement. One of them, a female with arms covered in ritual scars, spoke up. "The humans think they can buy what warriors have earned with blood. This is not our way." Sarah had expected this. She had read every report about Korthek culture before coming. Here, they believed that strength was the only thing that mattered. Physical power decided who was right and who was wrong. It was a simple way to see the world, but it made diplomacy very difficult. "Perhaps we can find another way to reach an agreement," Sarah said carefully. Thalgrim stood up from his chair. Even sitting down, he had been tall. Standing, he looked like a living statue. "There is only one way that matters to the Korthek. The way of strength." The hall grew quiet. Sarah could feel hundreds of eyes watching her. She had been in dangerous situations before, but this felt different. The air itself seemed to press down on her. "You speak of your people as Deathworlders." Thalgrim continued. "You say humans are dangerous fighters. But we see only weakness." He gestured at Sarah with one huge hand. "They send us this tiny creature to speak for them. Where is their strength?" Sarah knew where this was heading. She had hoped it would not come to this, but the Korthek were predictable in their own way. When words failed, they turned to violence. It was what they understood best. "I propose a test," Thalgrim announced. The words rang out across the silent hall. "Let the humans prove their strength the Korthek way, in combat." The crowd began to murmur with excitement. Sarah could see warriors leaning forward in their seats. Violence was entertainment to them. It was also how they solved problems. "Single combat," Thalgrim said, warming to his theme. "One human warrior against one Korthek warrior. If the human wins, we will consider your treaty. If the Korthek wins—" He shrugged his massive shoulders. "Then we know humans are not worth our time." Sarah's diplomatic training told her to refuse, to ask for time to contact her government, to send for a military escort. But her instincts told her something different. This was the moment that would decide everything. Who would represent the Korthek in this combat? she asked. Thalgrim smiled, showing teeth like broken stones. Gorvik the Undefeated. A ripple of excitement went through the crowd. Sarah heard the name whispered with respect and fear. Even she had heard of Gorvik. The Korthek champion had never lost a fight in 40 years of combat. He was a legend among his people. As if summoned by his name, a figure emerged from the crowd. Gorvik was huge even by Korthek standards. He stood nearly 9 feet tall, with muscles that looked like they had been carved from granite. Scars covered his gray skin like a map of every battle he had ever fought. His eyes were black holes that seemed to absorb light. The crowd began to cheer as Gorvik walked to the center of the hall. He raised his arms, and his roar shook dust. From the stone ceiling, this was their hero. Their perfect warrior. Gorvik has killed 300 enemies in single combat, Thalgrim announced proudly. He has broken the backs of Terran bears with his bare hands. He has crushed the shells of Arcturus battle crabs. No warrior in the galaxy can stand against him. Sarah looked up at the massive champion. He was studying her the way a cat might study a mouse. There was no hatred in his eyes, just a cold calculation. He was already planning how he would kill her. So, Thalgrim said, turning back to Sarah, will the humans send a real warrior to face our champion? Or will you admit that you are too weak to deserve what you ask for? Sarah stood up slowly. The chair scraped against the stone floor, the small sound loud in the sudden silence. Every eye in the hall was on her. I accept the challenge, she sighed. The words seemed to hang in the air. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the hall erupted. Korthek warriors jumped to their feet, shouting with laughter and disbelief. Some pointed at Sarah like she was the funniest thing they had ever seen. Others just stared, as if they could not believe what they had heard. You? Thalgrim's voice cut through the noise. You will fight Gorvik? Yes, Sarah said simply. But you are ... Thalgrim seemed to struggle for words. You are nothing. A tiny, human female. Gorvik will break you in half without even trying. Maybe, Sarah agreed. But I still accept. Gorvik himself had not moved. He stood in the center of the hall like a mountain, watching Sarah with those black eyes. For the first time, he spoke. His voice was like grinding stone. I have never killed anything so small, he said. It will be over quickly. Sarah nodded. That's what I'm counting on. The laughter grew louder. Warriors slapped each other on the back and made jokes about human stupidity. But Sarah noticed that Thalgrim was not laughing. The war chief was studying her with new interest. Very well, Thalgrim said finally. Tomorrow at dawn we will have our combat. Prepare yourself, little human. Tonight may be your last. Sarah bowed politely. Thank you for the opportunity. As she walked out of the hall, the laughter followed her, but she did not mind. Let them laugh. Tomorrow, they would learn why humans had survived on their death world for so long. Tomorrow, they would understand that the most dangerous predators often looked harmless. Dawn came early on Korthek Prime. The red sun cast long shadows across the combat arena as thousands of Korthak warriors filled the stone seats. Word had spread quickly through the city about the tiny human who thought she could fight their greatest champion. They came to watch what they expected to be a very short and very bloody show. Sarah stood in the preparation chamber beneath the arena. The room was built for Korthak warriors, so everything was too big for her. The stone bench came up to her chest. The weapon racks held swords longer than she was tall. Even the water basin required her to stand on her toes to reach. Her diplomatic team had tried to talk her out of this all night. Ambassador Wilson, her second in command, had been the most upset. This is suicide, Sarah, he had said. Gorvik will kill you in seconds. Let me contact Earth Command. We can send real soldiers. But Sarah knew there was no time for that. Ships took weeks to travel between stars. The Korthak would see any delay. as proof of human weakness. This moment was their only chance. Now she was alone in the chamber, doing what she always did before a fight. She stretched slowly, feeling each muscle in her body respond. Her movements were careful and precise, like a dancer warming up before a performance. Above her, she could hear the crowd growing louder. Thousands of voices joined together in chants and war songs. The sound came down through the stone like distant thunder. A Korthek guard came to check on her. He was young, probably new to his job. His eyes went wide when he saw what she was doing. Sarah had removed her diplomatic jacket and shirt. Underneath, she wore a simple black tank top that showed her arms and shoulders. The Korthek could see her muscles now. They were not big like theirs, but they were clearly defined. Hard, real, more importantly. They could see her scars. There was a long white line across her left shoulder where a knife had cut deep. 3 small circular marks on her right arm from bullet wounds. A jagged scar along her ribs from shrapnel that had nearly killed her on Europa Station. Each mark told a story of violence survived. The guard stared at the scars for a long moment. Then he looked at her face with new understanding. This was not the soft diplomat they had all been laughing at. This was something else entirely. "You are a soldier," he said quietly. Sarah continued her stretches. "I was, before I became a diplomat." "What kind of soldier?" "The kind they send when talking does not work." The guard nodded slowly and left without another word. Above in the arena, the crowd was reaching a fever pitch. Sarah could hear Gorvak's name being chanted over and over. She climbed the stone steps toward the arena entrance, her bare feet silent. On the cold rock. The arena was enormous. It could hold 50,000 Korthek, and every seat was full. The fighting space in the center was a circle of sand surrounded by high walls. Ancient bloodstains had turned the sand dark in places where countless warriors had bled and died. Gorvak was already there, putting on a show for the crowd. He grabbed a practice dummy made of metal and wood, lifted it over his head, and threw it against the arena wall. The dummy exploded into pieces with a crash that echoed through the arena. The crowd roared its approval. Next, he picked up an iron bar as thick as Sarah's arm. He bent it into a pretzel shape with his bare hands, then threw it aside like garbage. The crowd grew even louder. Then Gorvak noticed Sarah entering the arena. He pointed at her and laughed. The sound was like rocks falling down a cliff. The entire crowd joined in the laughter. To them, the contrast was ridiculous. Gorvak stood 9 feet tall and weighed as much as a small car. His muscles bulged under his gray skin like living rocks. Sarah barely came up to his chest. She looked like a child next to him, but Sarah was not paying attention to the crowd. She was studying Gorvak the way a scientist might study a specimen. She watched how he moved, where he put his weight, how his massive frame shifted when he turned. She noted the old injuries that had healed incorrectly, the spots where his huge muscles might work against him. Gorvak noticed her staring and flexed his arms. His biceps were bigger than her entire torso. "Are you afraid, little human?" he called. "Out. It is not too late to run away." Sarah walked to the center of the arena. Her movements were fluid and controlled, like water flowing over stones. She stopped exactly in the middle of the fighting circle and began to stretch again. The crowd found this hilarious. Here was their mighty champion, flexing and roaring like a force of nature, while the tiny human did what looked like morning exercises. Some warriors were laughing so hard they had tears in their eyes, but not everyone was laughing. In the royal box, War Chief Thalgrim watched Sarah with growing curiosity. There was something about the way she moved, something that did not match what he had expected. "She is very calm," observed Korthek Commander Vex, Thalgrim's military advisor. "Most creatures show fear when facing Gorvak." "Yes," Thalgrim agreed. "Too calm." Down in the arena, bookmakers were taking bets from the crowd. The odds were so heavily in Gorvak's favor that they were almost giving money away. Some Korthek bet their entire month's wages on their champion, confident it was free money. A few smart ones, however, noticed what Thalgrim had noticed. They saw how Sarah moved with the grace of a natural predator. They saw the scars on her body and the cold calculation in her eyes. These wise few placed small bets on the human, just in case. The ceremonial drums began to beat. Deep, thundering sounds that matched the rhythm of a war march. The crowd gradually grew quiet as the moment of combat approached. A horn blew 3 times. This was the signal that the fight was about to begin. Gorvek raised his arms to the crowd. One final time, they cheered him like a god. He was their perfect warrior, their undefeated champion. In 40 years of combat, no enemy had ever even come close to beating him. Sarah finished her stretches and stood perfectly still in the center of the arena. Her breathing was slow and controlled. Her heart rate had actually decreased as the moment approached. This was what years of training had taught her. In combat, excitement was the enemy. Calm was survival. The ceremonial gong waited at the edge of the arena. When it rang, the fight would begin. Gorvek cracked his knuckles. The sound was like breaking bones. Sarah closed her eyes and took one last deep breath. The crowd held its breath. Gong ringer raised his hammer. 10 seconds. That was all Sarah needed. The Korthek were about to learn that the deadliest predators on Earth were not the biggest or strongest. They were the smartest. The gong rang out across the arena like a thunderclap. The sound echoed off the stone walls and faded into silence. For one heartbeat, nothing moved. Then Gorvak charged. The massive Korthek champion moved like a mountain avalanche. His feet pounded the sand, each step shaking the ground. His huge arms spread wide to grab Sarah and crush her like a bug. His mouth opened in a war cry that could be heard in the highest seats of the arena. The crowd roared with excitement. This was what they had come to see. Their perfect warrior destroying the foolish little human who had dared to challenge him. Sarah waited. She stood perfectly still as 9 feet of muscle and fury thundered toward her. Her eyes tracked Gorvak's movement with the calm focus of a scientist watching an experiment. She saw exactly what she had expected to see. The champion was fast for something so big, but he moved in straight lines. No finesse. No strategy. Just raw power trying to overwhelm everything in its path. When Gorvek was 3 steps away, Sarah moved. She did not move back or to the side like most fighters would. Instead, she stepped forward and slightly to her left. It was a tiny movement, almost too small to see, but it was perfectly timed. Gorvak's massive right arm swung toward where Sarah had been standing. His fingers closed on empty air. The momentum of his charge carried him forward, but now Sarah was no longer in front of him. She was beside him, moving in the same direction he was. The crowd did not understand what they were seeing. It looked like Sarah was running away, staying just ahead of Gorvak's reaching hands. Some of them booed, thinking the human was trying to avoid the fight, but Sarah was not running away. She was doing something much more dangerous. As Gorvak stumbled forward, trying to change direction, Sarah placed her left hand on his lower back. To the crowd, it looked like she was just touching him. They could not see the precise pressure she applied to a specific nerve cluster. They could not see how her fingers found the exact spot where his spine curved. Gorvik felt it, though. A sharp pain shot up his back like lightning. His left leg went numb for just a moment. It was not long, but it was enough. The champion's balance shifted. His huge body began to tip forward. He tried to catch himself, but his numb leg could not support his weight. He stumbled, his arms windmilling as he fought to stay upright. Sarah was already moving to her next position. She flowed around, Gorvak's falling body like water on a rock. Her movements were so smooth, they looked like a dance. As the champion fell forward, Sarah dropped low and swept her right leg behind his only good leg. It was not a hard kick. She did not try to break his leg or cause him pain. She simply removed the last thing keeping him upright. Physics did the rest. Gorvuk crashed to the sand face first. The impact shook the entire arena. Dust rose in clouds around his massive body. The crowd fell silent, shocked at seeing their champion on the ground. But Sarah was not finished. As Gorvuk pushed himself up on his hands and knees, Sarah was already behind him. She had learned this move 20 years ago in a dirty fighting gym on Mars colony. It was designed to end fights quickly and quietly. She slipped her right arm around Gorvak's thick neck. Her forearm pressed against one side of his throat, while her bicep pressed against the other. Her left hand grabbed her right wrist, completing the circle. It was called a blood choke. Not because it cut off air, but because it stopped blood from reaching the brain. Applied correctly, it could make even the strongest warrior unconscious in seconds. Gorvuk felt the pressure and panicked. He reached back with his huge hands, trying to grab Sarah and pull her off. But she was positioned perfectly, using his own body to shield herself from his desperate grabs. The champion tried to stand up, thinking he could slam Sarah against the arena wall. But she had wrapped her legs around his waist, making herself part of him. When he stood, she came with him. The choke stayed in place. Gorvuk spun around, trying to shake her loose. He was still incredibly strong, even with her hanging on his back. But strength meant nothing if blood could not reach his brain. The crowd watched in growing horror as their undefeated champion staggered around the arena like a drunk man. His movements became slower and less coordinated. His huge hands clawed at Sarah's arms, but he could not get a grip. Sarah held on with grim determination. She had done this before, to enemies much more dangerous than Gorvuk. Terrorists on Europa. Station. Pirates in the asteroid belt. Rebels on Titan who had thought humans were too soft to fight back. They had all learned the same lesson Gorvuk was learning now. 5 seconds after the choke was applied, Gorvak's vision began to blur. 7 seconds, and his legs started to shake. 9 seconds, and his knees buckled. 10 seconds after the fight began, Gorvuk the undefeated collapsed unconscious to the arena floor. Sarah released the choke and rolled away from the fallen champion. She stood up slowly, brushing sand from her clothes. Gorvuk lay motionless on his side, breathing but completely unconscious. The arena was silent. 50,000 Korthak warriors stared at the impossible scene before them. Their greatest champion, their perfect warrior, their undefeated hero, was sleeping in the sand like a baby. The tiny human stood over him, not even breathing hard. Sarah looked up at the crowd and waited. She did not smile or celebrate. She had done what needed to be done, nothing more. Now it was time to see how the Korthak would react to having their entire worldview turned upside down. In the royal box, War Chief Thalgrim slowly stood up. His face showed no emotion, but his mind was racing. He had just watched everything he believed about strength and power proven wrong in 10 seconds. Voice finally broke the silence. It came from somewhere high in the crowd. How? The single word echoed through the arena. It was the question every Korthak was thinking. How had the tiny human done the impossible? Sarah looked up toward the royal box and spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. On my world, we learned long ago that being the biggest does not make you the strongest. Being the strongest does not make you the winner. She gestured toward the unconscious Gorvuk. Sometimes being smart is enough. The crowd began to murmur. Some Korthak were angry, feeling like they had been cheated somehow. Others were curious, wanting to understand what they had just seen. A few were already starting to show something that looked like respect. Sarah waited for War Chief Thalgrim to speak. The fate of the treaty, and possibly the future relationship between their peoples, depended on what happened next. The champion was defeated. Now came the real test. Gorvuk woke up slowly. His eyes opened and stared at the red sky above the arena. For a moment, he looked confused, like he could not remember where he was or how he had gotten there. Then memory returned, and his face showed shock. To Korthik. Medics helped him sit up. He looked around the arena until his eyes found Sarah. She was standing where she had been when the fight ended, calm and patient. Korthik stared at her for a long time, as if seeing her for the first time. "I do not understand," he said quietly. His voice was hoarse from the choke. "What did you do to me?" Sarah walked over to him. The crowd watched every step. "I used pressure. Points to disrupt your nervous system. Then I applied a blood choke that cut off circulation to your brain. You were unconscious in 10 seconds. Korthik touched his neck where her arm had been. "But I am stronger than you." "Much stronger." "Yes," Sarah agreed. "You are stronger. But strength alone is not enough." The champion looked troubled. Everything he had believed about combat had just been proven wrong. "Teach me," he said suddenly. The request surprised everyone, including Sarah. In Korthik culture, asking to learn from someone meant admitting they were better than you. For their greatest champion to ask this of a defeated enemy was almost unthinkable. "Teach me this way of fighting," Korthik said again. "I have spent 40 years believing that being the biggest meant being the best. You have shown me I was wrong." War Chief Thalgrim climbed down from the royal box and walked onto the arena floor. The crowd parted before him like water. When he reached Sarah, he stopped and studied her face. "You are not what you appeared to be," he said. "No," Sarah replied. "I am not. What are you really?" Sarah thought about how to explain it in words the Korthak would understand. On Earth, we have a saying: the most dangerous person in the room is not the one who looks dangerous. It is the one who does not need to look dangerous. Thalgrim nodded slowly. "Your world made you this way. In part, Earth is not kind to the weak. We had to become clever to survive. We learned to use our minds as weapons when our bodies were not enough." "And you?" Thalgrim asked. "What made you?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Wars, bad people who thought they could take what they wanted because they were bigger and stronger. Someone had to stop them. So you became a soldier." "I became many things: soldier, spy, assassin, whatever was needed to protect people who could not protect themselves." Sarah looked around the arena at the thousands of watching faces. "Then I became a diplomat, because talking is usually better than fighting." "But you can still fight when I have to." Thalgrim was beginning to understand. "Your people did not send you here by accident. They knew this might happen." Sarah smiled for the first time since arriving on Korthik Prime. "My government hoped we could settle this with words. But they sent me because they knew your people respect strength above all else. They wanted someone who could speak your language if necessary. And that language is violence. Sometimes. But today it was respect." Thalgrim looked at Korthik, who was being helped to his feet by the medics. The champion was wobbly but determined to stand on his own. "You defeated our greatest warrior in 10 seconds, yet you show him no shame. You offer to teach him. Why?" "Because he fought with honor," Sarah said. "He was not cruel or mean. He was just doing what his culture taught him was right. There is no shame in that." The war chief considered this. Around them, the crowd was growing restless. They wanted to know what would happen next. The traditional rules said that whoever won the combat was right. But no one had expected the winner to be human. "The treaty," Thalgrim said finally. "You have won the right to it." "I have won the right to discuss it," Sarah corrected. "But I would rather earn it through friendship than take it through conquest." This made Thalgrim laugh. It was not mocking laughter like before, but genuine amusement. "You defeat our champion and then offer to be our friend? Humans are strange creatures. We prefer to think of ourselves as practical." Thalgrim turned to address the crowd. His voice carried across the arena without effort. "The human has won, according to our laws. But more than that, she has shown us something we did not know. Strength comes in many forms, the crowd murmured uncertainly. This was not what they had expected to hear. For generations we have believed that the biggest warrior was the best warrior. We have ignored the power of the mind in favor of the power of the body. Today we learned that this was a mistake. Thalgrim gestured to Sarah. This tiny human defeated Gorvak not through luck or trickery, but through knowledge and skill. She used his own strength against him. She turned his size into a weakness. Some in the crowd were nodding now. Others still looked confused or angry. I propose an exchange, Thalgrim announced. We will sign the mining treaty with Earth. In return, we ask that they send teachers to show us these new ways of fighting, ways that use the mind as well as the body. Sarah felt relief wash through her. The mission was a success. But more than that, it was the beginning of something bigger. We would be honored to share our knowledge, she said. And we would be honored to learn from you as well. The Korthek have wisdom about courage and honor that my people could benefit from. Gorvak stepped forward, still unsteady, but determined. I would like to be the first student, he said. If you will have me. Sarah bowed to him with genuine respect. I would be honored to teach you, Champion Gorvak. The crowd began to cheer. Not the bloodthirsty roar they had made before the fight, but something warmer. They were cheering for both warriors now. As Sarah walked off the arena floor with Thalgrim and Gorvak, she thought about what had just happened. She had come here to negotiate a simple mining agreement. Instead, she had started what might become a true friendship between two very different peoples. Behind them, Korthak warriors were already talking excitedly about these new fighting techniques. Word would spread across their world within days. Soon, there would be requests for human instructors, human books, human ideas about combat and strategy. The Korthak would learn that true strength was not about being the biggest or the loudest. It was about being prepared, being smart, and being willing to use whatever advantages you had. And humans would gain allies who understood courage and honor in ways that few species did. Sarah smiled as they walked toward the palace. Sometimes the best victories were the ones that turned enemies into friends. Sometimes being fragile was exactly what the universe needed.